we knew the exact tone that we wanted it to be. And Carl Reiner said to me, he said, you can establish the tone of the movie.
Comedy legend or not, Steve Martin has carried some serious grudges. Behind the laughter, charm, and decades of iconic performances, Martin quietly held frustrations with certain co-stars who made life on set or on stage far from enjoyable. For years, he stayed quiet, never indulging in messy public feuds or tabloid headlines. But little by little, stories have surfaced that reveal the truth. These are 6 actors Steve Martin openly admitted he hated working with the most. Let's start with Chevy Chase. When Steve Martin, Chevy Chase, and Martin Short came together in the 1986 comedy Three Amigos, audiences saw 3 legends delivering big laughs in a Western-inspired farce. On screen, their chemistry looked effortless, the trio of bumbling silent film stars stumbling into a real-life showdown. But behind the cameras, things were tense. For Martin, the project became less a celebration of comedic friendship and more a test of patience, especially when it came to Chevy Chase. Martin approached the film with his usual professionalism. He showed up prepared, knowing his lines, and ready to stick to the script he himself had co-written with Randy Newman and Lorne Michaels. To Steve, comedy wasn't about showing off. It was about rhythm, timing, and trusting the craft of a carefully written script. Chevy Chase, however, operated by a different philosophy. Already a big star thanks to Saturday Night Live and films like Caddyshack and Fletch, Chase had a reputation for brilliance mixed with difficulty. He disliked authority, improvised constantly, and often changed lines mid-scene. On set, he interrupted takes to toss in new jokes usually designed to steal the spotlight. To Martin, this wasn't playful improvisation, it was disruption. He never lashed out or caused a scene. Steve was far too controlled for that, but his sarcasm spoke volumes. At one point, he quipped, "If ego was money, Chevy could buy Wall Street." It was a line delivered with a smile, but everyone knew it carried real sting. What should have been a collaborative ensemble comedy became a tug-of-war for attention. While Martin Short often played mediator, the damage was done. By the time filming ended, Steve Martin quietly vowed never to work with Chevy Chase again. The final film may be a cult classic, but for Steve, it was also a painful reminder that not all friendships on screen translate behind the scenes. Another clash came with Bette Midler. Unlike Chevy Chase, she wasn't a co-star in a film but a partner for a high-profile charity gala where the two were co-hosts. Steve Martin, ever the professional, arrived with a tightly written monologue, sharp and witty, perfectly balanced to set the evening's tone. But Bette Midler thrived on spontaneity and spectacle. As Martin delivered his careful lines, she suddenly abandoned the script, broke into song, and commandeered the stage with her larger-than-life energy. The audience loved her, but for Martin it was a disaster. His rhythm was shattered, his words drowned out, and what was supposed to be teamwork turned into a one-woman show. Steve stayed polite, smiling through the chaos, but eventually he'd had enough. Quietly, he left the event early, a subtle but clear statement. Later, he sent in a donation to the charity with a note attached. Albeit came from her biggest fan. Silence. Witty, cutting, and unmistakably frustrated, Martin's message made the rounds in Hollywood. To him, the clash wasn't about jealousy, it was about respect. He valued balance and professionalism, while Midler was unapologetically flamboyant. The two never became enemies, but Steve never agreed to co-host with her again. The story was different, but equally tense, with Robin Williams. On paper, Martin and Williams should have been magic together, two titans of comedy, each adored for their unique style. But where Steve Martin was precise and deliberate, Robin Williams was chaos incarnate. Williams' improvisations were a whirlwind of voices, characters, and rapid-fire jokes, dazzling audiences but leaving fellow performers gasping to keep up. The two shared the stage for a skit meant to showcase their contrasting styles. But when Williams veered off script into a spontaneous, roaring bit, the carefully planned rhythm collapsed. The crowd roared with laughter, but Martin was stranded in the chaos. Later, he famously described the experience: "Performing with Robin is like reading poetry on a roller coaster. It was admiration mixed with exhaustion." Steve respected Williams immensely, but he quietly decided never to collaborate again. There was no bitterness, just the understanding that their styles, though both brilliant, could never coexist peacefully. Goldie Hawn presented another unexpected challenge. Their 1992 film Hausleiter looked effortless on screen, with sparkling chemistry and sharp comedic banter. But behind the scenes, their working styles clashed. Steve Martin was disciplined, punctual, and prepared. Goldie Hawn was loose, playful, and prone to improvisation. Her spontaneity often threw off the rhythm Steve relied on, leaving him quietly frustrated. One small moment stuck with him the most. At a party, Steve played the banjo, an instrument he revered. Goldie made a lighthearted joke at his expense, something she intended as harmless. But for Martin, whose music was deeply personal, the teasing stung. The remark may have been small, but it reinforced his sense that working with her was not harmonious. Though they remained friendly in public, Steve declined offers to collaborate with her again. For audiences, their partnership was delightful. For Martin, once was enough. Perhaps the most painful rift came with Bill Murray. In the late 1970s, during a live sketch performance, Murray showed up nearly an hour late, already an unforgivable offense to the punctual and prepared Martin. But it didn't stop there. Once on stage, Murray mocked Martin's clean-cut style, drawing laughs but turning Steve into the butt of the joke. For Martin, it was sabotage. He valued trust and rhythm in comedy, and Murray had shattered both. The fallout was quiet but deep. The two men didn't speak for over a decade, even avoiding each other at major industry events. Martin saw Murray's spontaneity as recklessness masquerading as genius, while Murray likely found Martin too rigid. In truth, they represented opposite poles of comedy, structure versus chaos. They could have created brilliance together, but instead, they kept their distance, their silence speaking louder than any feud. Finally, there was Jim Carrey. At a comedy awards show in the 1990s, Carrey, then at the peak of his Ace Ventura and Dumb and Dumber fame, turned his acceptance speech into a 14-minute whirlwind of impressions and antics. What began as funny soon became exhausting. Steve Martin, sitting near the front, grew restless. At last, he exaggerated a yawn, walked on stage, and held up a giant "Wrap It Up" sign. The audience roared, thinking it was part of the act, but Martin wasn't joking. He was frustrated. Later, he admitted that while he respected Carrey's talent, he found his style exhausting. Hollywood even floated the idea of pairing them in a buddy comedy, but Martin declined. To him, working with Carrey would be chaos, not comedy. He described their dynamic as oil and water, and he never changed his mind. Across all these clashes, Chase, Midler, Williams, Hawn, Murray, and Carrey, a clear pattern emerges. Steve Martin valued structure, discipline, and respect for the craft. He wasn't interested in chaos or ego-driven performances that risked derailing the art of comedy. While he admired many of his peers, admiration didn't always translate into compatibility. For audiences, these stories reveal a fascinating side of a man often seen as the picture of calm wit and sophistication. Comedy may look effortless, but behind the scenes, it's a delicate balance of timing, trust, and teamwork. And for Steve Martin, that balance was everything. So what do you think? Were these clashes inevitable, given the personalities involved, or was Steve Martin too rigid to adapt? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this look behind the curtain of Hollywood comedy, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.